Hello, Pastor. How are you,
Hey,
sir?
Good
um,
evening, Pastor.
it's been a wonderfully beautiful day. Yes, thanks for having me on here, Tyler, Lori. Yes, thank you.
Well, I
Hello.
want to get
Welcome to
this
the
out of the
show.
way just so I don't mess it up, and I would try, but will you pronounce your first name for me?
Yes, so I like this. It's like a warm meal,
Okay.
Miilhan.
Miilhan. All right.
Miilhan.
All right.
And I assume you
What?
know how to pronounce the last name, but Stevens.
Yeah, Stevens I got, but my wife is from um her dad is from Laos. So her middle name, she won't even let me say it. She's upstairs watching, and she's I'm sure cringing right now, but she goes, she won't even let me try.
Yeah, I used to fight it when I was growing up, like making sure people pronounce it right, and then
hmm
people just give me a nickname like Millhouse, and at some point I just embraced it, and it's
There you
like,
go. That's
but
me. That's me with my size. I just embrace it.
right. Well, as long as I get to say it, it's a warm meal. Then it helps.
I love it. I love it. Well, me and Lori are learning a lot about what's going on with the Unification Church and the rally this weekend. I did queue up a little background here. I hope this is appropriate, but I feel like this is what we're going for, right? Would that be accurate?
For my entire life, I feel is for that purpose. Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Even my name, I didn't explain the meaning of my name actually.
Please do.
I was given to me by a Korean pastor, and it's got three characters in it. First is me, second is il, last is han. So if you know how to, in Korean, the Korean nation is Hanguk. So the last one's Han. The first one's Miguk. Second is Ilbon, Hanguk. So it's America, Japan, and Korea, in unity with each other. So you can imagine how many times I've had to explain that, and it kind of it grew on me, and just this hope that we can bring, not just Korea together, but even the whole world together.
So that's what literally gives your life purpose. It's right
Yeah,
there in the name.
I could fight it or just, hey, it's interesting.
hmm
Might as well keep it interesting.
There's power in a name.
There
That makes
is.
a lot of sense. And so that feeds into our topic tonight, which is the big peace march that's happening in New York City tomorrow afternoon. And I know we have a lot of listeners in the New York area. And I hope you guys will come out and show your support for this. Pastor, would you tell us a little bit about this march, what the idea is, and what you hope to achieve?
Yeah, I mean, for me, this was really a gift from God, this opportunity, because if you look at my Facebook page, I kind of explained the whole thing, because we put this together in like 2 months, but actually this is like a lifelong mission for a lot of us. Um, I'm coming in here wanting peace on the Korean Peninsula. I want a peace treaty. I want unification ultimately. How we work that out is probably between some very smart people. But
Not our current diplomats. They don't seem to be doing a very good job.
yeah, it just changes too often. You can't keep anything really going. So it's up to us really. But the issue, not many people know about Korea, and so I ran into Bishop Lubin Muis, who I mention often. He's a bishop in Brooklyn, and he's coming from Haiti, and so he gets 50 calls a day. Can you imagine 50 people calling him every day, telling him all the unspeakable things happening in their country, and he's just wanting to do something about it. So we met each other a few months ago, and I felt, you know what? And instead of saying help me, he's like, how can I help Russia and Ukraine? How can I help Korea? How can I help the world? And it just I was so moved by that, because it really embodies the spirit of our founders, Reverend Dr. Sum Young Moon, Hachan Moon. We call true parents, as you might know. They had the same. He had the same spirit, and so we came together. We said, let's make a petition to the United Nations to help them do their job. They're working very hard, but let's come up with an idea that can inspire people to see each other as one family, why don't, the war in Russia and Ukraine has been gone for over a year now. Let's mourn the losses of everybody. I went online. I looked at videos of course, we see a lot of footage of what's going on in Ukraine. I looked at a video of a POW calling home, and from Russia, and he was just telling his mom, like, my brothers, like, they all just got slaughtered out there. Like, they were just sent out to slaughter, and I'm like, if we can't feel the pain of even our opponents, and we're not planting seeds for tomorrow, and we need to do that. So this petition, this march is planting seeds for the future. Yes, things look terrible right now, but we got a lot of young people coming, and we want them to know that there is a future after all this craziness. So
I hope
that's the
so.
spirit of it. Yeah.
I hope so. So this isn't just a peace march calling for peace between Ukraine and Russia. It's also for reunification of the Korean Peninsula. Is that correct?
Yes. I mean, it is all of them. We felt like it wouldn't be fair to just choose one. And I know, of course, if you focus on one, it could be a little more focused and all that. But we wanted to take God's side, and God sees
That's right.
all the pain, all the moms, all the dads, all the children. So we wanted to represent that voice.
I love that. And this is an interfaith event where you've got all these different religious groups taking part. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. That is kind of our strength. And maybe, if you're familiar with our movement, Unification Church, we do just interfaith all the time. We have these mass weddings, and we have all the different faith leaders giving prayers for all the couples. And, this is, it's deeply important to us that we acknowledge all the faiths. And in fact, I would say there's as many religions as there are people, because we all have unique expressions to experience God or love in our life. And so we want to make sure that those are all honored, so we all can be free to.
Can you tell me about some of the different church groups, religious groups that are taking part tomorrow?
And I was also curious about just an overview of the Unification Church. I'll be honest, I don't know a whole lot about it, and I was hoping you could teach me.
Okay. We have, different churches in Brooklyn that are coming out. That's kind of where a lot of our friendships are. I can't name all the pastors that are coming. I have a list, but I'm not sure who's going to be there, so most of them are confirmed. But yeah, we have not all religious too. One issue that we had is that it's on a Saturday. And so we were kind of careful about interfaith because,
yeah, the Seventh-day Adventists,
and then our Jewish, Orthodox friends. But this is not the last march we're going to do. In fact, we're planning another event in the near future. And forgive me for my voice. There is a cough going around my house. I've got little kids, so.
Yeah, forgive me for not explaining that, Pastor. You were a little under the weather today, but you're pushing through for us tonight, and we appreciate that.
Appreciate that.
I mean, as long as you're okay, because
we're good. We're good. You're perfect, sir. So the unification, is it more a unification of like spiritual beliefs, or is it a focus on unification between North and South Korea, or is it both? Or
yeah, it is both.
Okay.
I mean, you have to understand the founders, right? You have the Reverend Sung Myung Moon. He's born in North Korea. Experienced a lot of difficulty there. And you imagine a 15-year-old boy going to a mountaintop and just crying out to God or whatever's out there. Why is everything so messed up? Seeing people die of hunger, or he was born in 1920, right? So there's a lot of confusion at that time, and he got an answer. And his answer was that God is I'm suffering with you. I'm not just I'm like God happy on his throne and just we're all down here and just suffering, but God is right there with us, and God doesn't know what to do any more than we do, but we're working on it together. And so he found this God that was grieving with us, and so that's where this movement began, and it was an answer to many other people who had the same question. And we all suffer, and we come to this point where like, if you're real, then why is all this happening? And if you are real, then I almost don't want to believe in a God that would allow this to happen. So he resolved that contradiction.
And when was the church founded?
Yeah, what year?
It's been around a long time. I don't remember.
Start?
1954. They formally started the Holy Spirit Association for the unification of world Christianity. So the mission originally was to unite Christianity. He actually didn't want to start a church because he wanted to just unite Christianity. Of course, maybe he claims to be the Messiah, returning Messiah, and that's the Messiah does. He brings back, reunites Christianity. Didn't happen. Long story short, so he started a church, and just to set the example, and we grew like crazy. And then, of course, everyone trying to stop it. As you guys know how that goes at CPI, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So in fact, that's how I met Caleb, because he was we could kind of understand each other,
And speaking of Caleb Maupin, he's going to join us here in a little while.
Yeah, I saw that text. So
CPI is also a co-sponsor of the Peace March this weekend in New York, and he's a friend of the show. We just had Caleb on a couple of weeks back for a Ask a Communist show, which was really interesting.
That, yeah.
But that's the whole idea here on Strange Bedfellows is we're trying
I love the name, by the way.
Oh, thank you. We want to talk to people who are different from ourselves and maybe, misunderstood organizations. Like I'm a libertarian. Libertarians are often misunderstood. Last week, we had the chair of the Libertarian Party on to explain what libertarianism is. We had Caleb on to explain communism, and we wanted to have you on to explain, I guess they'd call you the Moonies, the Unification Church. I don't know if Moonies is a word that you guys like or not. Probably not.
It's funny because my elders, they hate that term because it was derogatory. It was used as a derogatory term back then. But my generation is kind of like, it's a lot easier to say unification is wrong, but we respect,
Are you embracing the Moonie now? It's like
it is what it is.
It is.
I guess I'm getting used to unificationist, as many syllables as it has.
Unificationist. Got it.
It does speak closer to, I think, what we're trying to achieve anyway.
Roger,
I get it. Well, I think me and Caleb would consider ourselves Christian communists. So, is that a term that I guess I'll show my ignorance here. I don't know exactly, as a communist trying to learn about Korea. I see the Unification Church came out in 1954. What year was the Korean War?
It's like what, 49 to 53?
Okay.
Yeah,
I believe.
So, was it a?
I'm not a history buff, by the way.
Oh, you're good, buddy.
That's my job.
Caleb will come in and he probably knows more about
Caleb
this
knows
than
that history very
anyone
well.
else in America.
Yeah.
But for me, at the end of the day, I don't. If you're trying to seek peace on the Korean Peninsula, because Caleb has mentioned before that there are Christians in North Korea, and it just to really think it through, for me as just a Midwestern American that's thinking about it, you couldn't get two more. It's just an absolute petri dish of economic experiments right there across the parallel. I mean, but but they're family members that can't see each other, right?
Yeah, it's a real tragedy. I mean, really, the world divided that nation. We can
Mm,
think, we can look at the politics, but really, it's the the mega powers just try to divvy it up after World War II, sort of thing, and that's kind of where it went wrong. But to look at Korea, you got to understand it's like a very shamanistic history. They're very spiritual people. You can't remove it from them. And so when they found Jesus, like it just went crazy. In fact, I think in Pyongyang was like they call it the Jerusalem of the East.
I
And
love that.
yeah, they're a spiritual people finding Christ. You can imagine what would happen, right? Something's going to happen there. And so, this imagine Korea being used to further God's will. That would be. I don't think Satan will allow that so easily. So
Mm,
it's divided. But they're one people. Those families are divided, and the sentiment of like the young people today, they kind of forgot about it.
mm,
I think the polls say that there is less interest in unification than before among like the young people today.
really?
Yeah, because they know it's just it is a mess. It's not easy. Plus, the big question is, well, then who's in charge,
Right.
right? And
Right.
so unification is for me, gosh, it's hard. It's just there's too many questions, and so for me, it can't start there. It's got to start with, well, let's just first feel the cost of this division.
Mm,
Let's start there, and then we start to put our heads together and work it out, as opposed to just, oh, here's a great idea and just like slap it on every 4 years, something new, like that's going nowhere. And I can feel Kim Jong-un's frustration. I can feel every person before him, their frustration. It's like, people keep changing. It's like no one can keep their promises anywhere.
yeah. I just feel like I don't know. If I was Korean, it would bother me that some imperialist country far away had cut my 1,000-year-old civilization in two,
Yeah.
and then engaged in such a cultural war that it could just stay like that, to change the minds of the youth to the point. I mean, that's happening in America too. People just kind of shrug and be like, that's the way it is. Good luck changing it. But I don't know. There's many directions we could go. I find it just fascinating the kind of, you said the Korea's like kind of has a shamanic past. Would it be correct to call that animism of a certain sort? And I know in China there was another leader, right, that claimed to be the second coming of Jesus. There's so many interesting
There's some
threads.
famous eyes out there. Yeah, no, yeah,
There's a lot.
yeah.
Well, I was raised Southern Baptist, so we'll have a lot to talk about. But I think we have one of our other guests backstage, and he is Mr. Knowledge on this issue. So fill
Hey,
us in, Caleb. Where have I made you cringe already tonight?
well, I've been on my way home. I've been listening as much as I can. I'm really happy to see this conversation happening, and I'm really happy about this march that's happening tomorrow. Because back in August, I went and visited the Manhattan Family Church because people that I work with internationally told me about all the important work that Reverend and Mrs. Moon have done to try and reconcile peace on the Korean Peninsula. And I didn't even really know that much about it. But, if you look at the fact that, Reverend Moon was imprisoned in North Korea, right? I mean, he was in prison. He, had a pretty bad time. But yet he was able to then in the 1990s go and meet with Kim Il-sung and have a meeting of reconciliation. And now, the Unification Church, which is a very anti-communist church, and they're quick to remind me of that. Please don't anyone misunderstand me, and they are very, very opposed to Marxism and communism and everything about it. But they also realize that the road to a better world is peace, and that North Korea is a country that hasn't gotten a fair shake in the world. Is that fair to say, Pastor Miilhan?
Well, I mean, socialism has some merit, because it resembles more like a family, which is what we're going towards. Communism is kind of like the issue is like this dialectic materialism. You kind of cut the head off of the leadership, and that's where God's supposed to be. So it might look like communism, but really we want to honor the owners and the leaders. So I think that was we didn't see it going that far in the evolution. I think you mentioned before. But there is socialism kind of makes sense, and even in our main theology text, we do see like an ideal, we call ideal socialism, where it is like a family. You get, like head of the household. It's not a monarchy, but like you do have things make more sense. You remove all the problems with capitalism, and you can create this more like a family again. And that's ideal, and that's assuming we're good people. So we're kind of a ways from there. But when we've all received God in Christ, then that's the goal anyway.
Well, I like that example. That's how I always explain it. I mean, if you're going to have a government at all, it should take care of its citizens. As me as a father, I should take care of my children. I feel like they do a lot of mental backflips to try to squirm out of that one, but it just makes sense. So.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, I absolutely, I've observed the Unification Church, and this is a group of people that, as Pastor Miilhan has said many times, they have been through a lot. There's been a lot of hate directed at them over the years, but yet they've endured, and they are very committed to seeing Korea reunify and standing with one of the countries, a country that has also been one of the most demonized countries in the world, that has just been subjected to so much threat and talk of nuclear weapons. And, when Donald Trump went to North Korea, when he crossed the demilitarized zone, when he met with Kim Jong-un, that was a beautiful moment. That was the first time you had an American sitting president actually, go to North Korea, shake hands with the North Korean leader. And that was a hopeful moment. And the military exercises, the USA does these military exercises on the Korean Peninsula every year, where, they basically take the whole army, the Air Force, everything, and they run them right up to the border. And North Korea is always wondering which of these exercises is going to turn out to actually just be an attack, right? They say, oh, it's just a war game. So they always wonder, is it there going to be one day that they run everything right up to the 38th parallel, and then it doesn't stop, right? And so Donald Trump put those military exercises on hold, and he stopped that. And it looked like there was some hope. But then, Donald Trump is out of office. And before that, it was pretty clear that, John Bolton didn't particularly care for it. Mike Pompeo was much more supportive of the peace talks. And it seems like now we're in a negative spot, President Yoon, the current president in South Korea, is once again started these military exercises. He met with Joe Biden, and the exercises are happening. And just the reports that we're seeing from the Korean Peninsula right now are awful. The USA is rehearsing the nuclear destruction of North Korea. Everything seems to have fallen apart, but we came so close, and so, anybody, no matter what their perspective, libertarian, Republican, Democrat, conservative, Christian, Buddhist, Muslim, anybody who wants to work for peace on the Korean Peninsula is somebody I want to talk to. So getting to know Pastor Miilhan and the community at Manhattan Family Church has been a very rewarding experience for me. So I'm really, really glad that you chose to have him on Strange Bedfellows, because if there's ever been a moment in American history where there's strange bedfellows, it's now. Rage Against the War Machine.
No kidding.
Rage Against the War Machine, that rally in D.C., that was a strange Bedfellows rally, if there ever was one, wasn't it? You were there, Tyler. Was it not a strange Bedfellows rally?
Yeah, it was wonderful. It was absolutely wonderful. And a bunch of people, talk crap on it, but they weren't there.
Exactly.
The reality on the ground was, we're still developing friendships out of that, real friendships. And it really made me realize that what people say on the internet, I know we're on the internet, so it's slightly ironic, but it's not that important. It's really not. I mean, I you should use the internet to bring people to real world events. And once you get them there and you meet them, it's really hard for me at least to hate them or say anything bad about them. You know, this is a tool developed by DARPA in East Asia during Vietnam, believe it or not, to divide people and keep tabs on us. But as Julian Assange showed us, we can fight back with it too, and we can come together and like Rage Against the War Machine. We all got together and made a lot of lifelong friends and developed, coalition relationships across the aisle in a fantastic way. And I hope you guys get to do that this weekend as well. It sounds like that's what's
I
going
did
to
want to
happen.
correct one thing you said. CPI, we are not official sponsors of this march. I just want to be very clear about that.
Oh, my bad. Sorry, Caleb.
We are going to participate. But this is conducted by churches, CPI, because we're not officially a religious organization of any kind. We're not official sponsors.
Okay.
But we are going to be gathering in Union Square at noon. And we're going to be having our own kind of Rage Against the War Machine speak out. Irene, who's the chair of the Delaware Libertarian Party, she's coming into town. And she's very prominent in the Rage Against the War Machine and the Mises Caucus, the Libertarian Party. She's coming to town. A few other people are coming to town, and we're going to have kind of a mini speak out in Union Square tomorrow starting at noon. And then we're going to go up to the UN and join this rally called by the churches. And we're really honored to do that. And, we are going to be prepared to talk about the Uhuru case because that's a big threat on civil liberties. We have a leaflet prepared with Tucker Carlson, talking about how Tucker Carlson and Glenn Beck and others have spoken up in support of the Uhuru movement. And we also are just going to be there. We have a nice banner we made with a Bible verse on it because we thought that would be appropriate. We actually got a special banner made with a Bible verse about peace on earth. So that'll be great. It's still rolled up. It just came in the mail, a couple days ago. And so we're just going to, try to participate in what we consider to be a very, very important event. What surprised me was I was on the listserv for the Rage Against the War Machine rally. And I sent the link to nypeacemarch.com and I said, hey, I'm thinking about going to this. And so many people just immediately said, oh, wow, there's something happening. And they just immediately messaged me back. And I've got a lot of people who say they're coming, tomorrow because they just want to do something. Everyone wants to do something. Everyone is so worried about how the world is going right now. When they see that there's a group of pastors, Haitians, Koreans, Jews gathering, to talk about peace, they want to be in on it. They want to be part of it. So I'm hoping we have a good turnout for our little speak out in Union Square. And I hope that we then have a nice stroll uptown to the UN. And I'm hoping it's a lovely day and it'll be all over my YouTube channel. You can be sure of that. So there you go.
Cool. Yeah. So if I understand correctly, these groups are going to merge, right? You're going to have the Union Square group join up with the interfaith groups, and then you're all going to march to the UN together. Is that right? And what time does that happen? 2:00?
So at 2:00, we begin our program. The march is like a 15 to 20 minute portion of it. We have we're going to have some moving testimonies from people from, Russia, Ukraine, Haiti. We have one person also from Harlem too. There's things going on. There's unrest in Harlem. There's someone, one of our pastors will speak about that. And then we're going to put our tears together, pray, and then we're going to march. And it's just a few blocks, come around back. So, I mean, Caleb, if your group joins us sometime during that program, that march will probably happen, an hour and a half into the program. So, yeah, you won't miss it. It'll happen.
Very good. What time do you arrive at the United Nations?
So at the Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza, right in front, as you know, on 1st and 47th, and it'll be at 2:00. The program will start at 2:00, but you'll see us there early enough, playing some music and doing some things. But yeah.
Well, I just had a question. I wanted to know, Caleb, how did you get to learn about the Unification Church, and how did you meet Pastor Stephens?
Well, that's, as I said, back in August, we slowed down a little bit what we were doing with CPI. Things, went on hold for a little bit. So I was on the phone with a number of people in different parts of the world that I talked to about politics, and I have been a supporter of North Korea for years. I mean, I'll just back up. I'll tell you one of the most moving experiences I've ever had in my life. Quito, Ecuador, 2013, the World Communist Youth Festival was happening. And, you know, it was the World Festival of Youth and Students, which is every 4 years, the UN sponsors like a gathering of youth who are opposed to imperialism and democracy. And it tends to be like a communist world youth gathering that happens every 4 years. I went to it in Quito, Ecuador. And, you know, all the people that were arriving at the airport, you know, from different countries for the youth festival, we were in different parts of the airport. And, you know, it was people from Greece, people from Albania, people from India and different African countries, et cetera. And we're all in our T-shirts and we're just young communists. And then everyone starts whispering that the plane from North Korea has arrived. The plane from North Korea has arrived. And I will never forget that, you know, the door like threw open, you know, the doors like slammed open. And the men were wearing were suits and ties, and the women were wearing traditional gowns, and they marched into the airport in like perfect formation. And the whole airport was just dead silent. Right? It's hundreds of communists from around the world. The airport is just dead silent. And then somebody started applauding, and then somebody else started applauding. And pretty soon this whole airport was just screaming in applause for the North Koreans. And tears rolled down my face because I thought of how many people in North Korea were killed by American bombs. And it was just one of the most moving experiences of my life. And at that festival, I got to spend a lot of time in, like, you know, they had a really big tent that was set up by the North Koreans. And, you know, they gave me, I still have here on my bookshelf some of the books they gave me. You know, I have, what is it? I've got the history and revolutionary activities of Kim Il-sung. You know, the biography of Kim Il-sung they published that they gave me. And, you know, they met with us. I have some comic books somewhere, you know, children's comic books they made about the Juche ideology and Kim Il-sung's teachings and such. And they were just so loving, you know, and like one of the things that's interesting in Korean culture, people do not hug. They just don't do that. You know, that's just culturally, you don't do that. But in Latin America, it's very different, you know, like, you know, it's a very, you know, people in Latin America, it's more of a Mediterranean kind of, you know, Spanish, Latin culture. They're hugging and kissing. So these North Koreans, they'd clearly been trained, right, to go to Ecuador. So as soon as the North Koreans saw you, they would like throw their arms around you forcefully. It was the most sweet, adorable thing I'd ever seen. And, you know, we met with the North Koreans and they said, you know what, you know, they said, you know, we have no hatred for average Americans, they said. They said, we hate the government of the United States that has killed so many of us, but we want Americans to support us. We love Americans, right? And they talked about how they really admired President Roosevelt and his efforts to fight Japan and how Japan has oppressed Korea for so long. And it was really meaningful. So I have been friendly for years, you know, with people that are sympathetic for peace on the Korean Peninsula. I've had articles printed in the North Korean daily newspaper. They printed an article I wrote that was published like in their national newspaper. You know, that was a few years back. So, you know, I've had connections, and there's something called the Korean Friendship Association. I don't know if people have ever heard of it, but it's an international grouping of people that are sympathetic somewhat to North Korea. They just opened a new office in Russia amid this conflict in Ukraine. The Korean Friendship Association just opened a new office in Russia, which is very exciting. Wow. And then, you know, we're also friendly with, you guys met Jyoti Brar of the Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist Leninist.
Love her.
You know, she's really, really great. And she's involved with the People's Democracy Party of South Korea that started this development called the World Anti-Imperialist Platform. And so, you know, as you know,
and she was just there. She just visited there like last week
and gave a great presentation about the need and how world peace should be the priority. All other issues are secondary right now. Exactly. And, you know, I was talking with different people in different countries, and they said, you know, of all the people in America who work for peace on the Korean Peninsula, you know, the Unification Church, that's one of the main leading organizations. So Caleb, you know, if you're slowing down CPI a little bit, go and talk to them. And so I walked in first, actually, Comrade Lily and myself, I guess the Manhattan Family Church wasn't meeting or anything. So we went over to the New Yorker Hotel. And they took us to an office at the New Yorker Hotel. And there was like a guy who was like the owner of the New Yorker Hotel. And we talked to him and gave him some CPI books and stuff. And he just kind of looked at us. I don't think he quite knew what to do with us then.
They would have no idea what you're doing there.
Yeah, right. And so, but then in August, we saw that the Unification, the Manhattan Family Church was starting to have services again. So I just went one Sunday morning. I just walked in. And, you know, after the service, I was able to chat with Pastor Miilhan. And I kept coming. And you know, and now I'm excited. And again, you know, obviously my religious beliefs are not in line with Pastor Miilhan's, and he knows that. But but I see them as playing a good role, especially in relation to the Korean Peninsula. And I want to support anything that they can do to that regard. And I will say that the communists of America have abandoned North Korea. The Communist Party USA no longer has any relationship with North Korea. Cut ties with them.
Tragic.
Why?
It's despicable.
I don't
Over
understand.
their proliferation of nuclear weapons. When they tested nuclear weapons, they officially cut ties. That used to be the main group in the United States that was friendly with North Korea.
Yeah.
They cut ties with them. Most of the communist groups in America have cut ties with them. And you know what that's really about? It's that the Democrats are the main party that doesn't like North Korea now. The Democrats like Cuba. So the communist groups in America, they all like Cuba because the Democrats like Cuba. But now that it's Donald Trump and the Republicans who are working for peace on the Korean Peninsula, these communists are more loyal to the Democratic Party.
Amen.
And that's why it's the same with Russia and Ukraine, right? These communist groups are supposed to be anti-imperialist, anti-fascist, or whatever. But on Ukraine, because they're loyal to the Democratic Party, they don't do that. And so, as somebody who had the experiences that I had meeting with the North Koreans around the world and such, to see the communist groups just kind of drop relationships with a country that is really under attack. And everything.
Well, and the Communist Party of America has been historically allied with North Korea since the Korean War.
Yeah,
pretty much. Am I wrong? Is that right? Until now,
historically speaking, but not anymore. I mean, they ended their relationship. I believe it was 2008, maybe 2007. The People's World ran an editorial basically denouncing them, and then they stopped going to the receptions they have at the UN mission, and that was the end of the relationship. The Communist Party USA likes China and Vietnam, but it does not like North Korea, and that's a shame. The Party of Communists still likes North Korea. The PCUSA folks, they still like North Korea. The Workers' World Party, that I used to be a member of, they still have a relationship with North Korea. Deirdre Griswold went on Tucker Carlson's show to defend North Korea. That was a big deal, but yeah, the communists have kind of cut ties. And, there's a lot of Korean Americans that are not communists at all that just want peace. They just want the demilitarization of their peninsula. They want, families reunified. They want the troops brought home. They want that DMZ to stop being, they call it the demilitarized zone. I think Miilhan made the point once. It's the most militarized zone in the world.
Hardly a demilitarized zone. That's right.
And if
you can't just take a picnic in the DMZ. Take your family.
But I understand, Pastor Miilhan, that Mrs. Moon actually had a proposal to turn it into a park at one point, and China signed on to that. Can you talk about that?
China signed on to it. That's interesting. I mean, again, it helps to have a good idea. Mm-hmm. We can talk a lot of politics, but it's like, okay, come up with something physical that people can change the subject for once. It's like you see all these images of North Korea, everyone's marching and everything, and can we change the subject? Can we look at something that's constructive together? And so Mother Moon and Father Moon, they had this vision to have a peace park on the DMZ, and they wanted the United Nations a part of that. Because they knew that the United Nations should be a part of that and work together towards that, and it would be a war memorial, but not just on one side; it's both sides. Right. And, I looked this up. I mean, you tell me if I'm wrong, but apparently there's no war memorial on Earth. We're coming into Memorial Day weekend. There's not one war memorial on Earth that honors the lives of both sides of the conflict. It really, God bless, yes, people serve the country. You want to be proud of your nation and your sacrifice, but it's like, well, who's taking God's side, which is looking at everyone. And this would be the first. And so that might be too difficult to get it in Korea. So I'm saying, let's make one for everybody. And that's what we're trying to do. And I don't care how many things
that.
Now.
Beautiful.
I believe that this is where it starts. Peace starts when we mourn the loss of the cost of our leadership, our lack of leadership, a lack of innovation, Caleb. Our lack of innovation has caused all of this. And so we should, I'm saying we should all repent. We failed these children, we failed these mothers. And that's, I want a Korean, a Russian, Ukrainian, Haitian mother to come to that memorial and find their son or daughter in that database, see their face pop up and weep together. Like, and yeah, it doesn't solve the problem. I know that, but it's the beginning.
Right.
That's where people can get a little more creative when it's your son or daughter on the line, as opposed to, it's just all the politics. And politics are necessary, but I do think there is innovation there. That's why I love the CPI kind of idea. Like, we do need to learn from each other.
Well, and let me add, part of the reason it's the Center for Political Innovation is we can admit that bad things were done in the history of communism. There's no reason to deny that. The way Christians were treated historically, in the Soviet Union and in communist countries around the world was not good. There was horrendous persecution that was rained down. And the communist world has largely realized that, if anything, Christianity and religion of all kinds is more beneficial to what it is communists are trying to do. When I went to Nicaragua, the slogan that they have painted everywhere is Christianity, socialism, and solidarity. And in 2018, I went to Russia and I covered the elections. I was embedded with the Russian Communist Party. I found out that the head of the Russian Communist Party, Gennady Zhuganov, he's a Russian Orthodox Christian.
That's right.
And he is converted to Christianity. And he says that one of the main reasons the Soviet Union failed is because they did not have God and they did not have a Christian teaching, and that the anti-religious aspect of communism in Russia ultimately hurt them in the long term. So
I agree.
And also with North Korea, I don't think we should pretend North Korea is like some kind of human rights paradise. It is absolutely not that. You don't have the freedom that we have here in the Western societies in North Korea. But that's because they're under attack. That's because they're surrounded. That's because there's nuclear bombs pointed at them. That's because, in the 90s, their food system came to a grinding halt because they couldn't import any oil and people starved to death. And when a country is under threat, they become very authoritarian. And if you want more freedom in North Korea, more freedom of speech, more freedom of religion, you need to lower the tension. You need to create a situation where there's more trade, where there's more companies going in there and doing business, where the country is a little more safe. And that's how societies open up. People who say they want to bring freedom to North Korea and then they escalate and they send more bombs and weapons, you're only creating a situation where there's going to be more authoritarianism. So, there was a time in my life where I feel like I was a bit naive about how communist governments are, right? And that, there was a time where I felt like, there was no persecution of Christians in the USSR. Yeah, there was, and it was wrong and it shouldn't have happened. And we can admit that, right? We can say that was wrong. And that if you look at the strengths of communist governments around the world, it's not this rebellion, this rage, this violence, right? The strength of communist governments is when they bring people together. I think, look, the fact that Trotsky, he believed in permanent revolution. That was his theory. He wanted to spread violent revolution all over the world. But the Russian people rejected Trotsky and they picked Stalin. And Stalin had gone to seminary school. He had learned to be a priest. Yeah. And he was the one who came up with socialism in one country. And he mobilized to build huge power plants and huge hospitals to wipe out illiteracy. And he's the one who actually brought the church back. He made it legal during World War II. There's a legend in Russia. I don't know if it's true or not. I have no way of knowing. But in Russia, there's a legend that Jesus appeared to this little boy in Siberia and told him, to go to Stalin and tell Stalin to bring back the church if you want to defeat the Nazis. And that's commonly believed in Russia, that it was divine intervention that told Stalin to bring back the church. So
it wasn't exactly divine, Caleb, if I can jump in. There was some politics involved in that decision as well, because of course, in the 1930s, we had finally, under the Roosevelt administration, started to normalize relations with the Soviets. And as we were careening into World War II, Franklin Roosevelt actually put a lot of direct pressure on Stalin to do something about this religious question. And the reason he did that was he said, I will never be able to sell the American people on the idea of providing under Lend-Lease money and weapons to a communist nation, because we'd always been so anti-communist here in the States. Now we were supposed to be friends with the communists to beat the Nazis, but it was going to be a tough sell to the American people who love their freedom of religion. And so he was sending letters. There's an interesting correspondence back and forth between Roosevelt and Stalin on that religious question. And there was a great deal of pressure being brought upon Stalin to do something about that so that the American people would feel better about supporting the Soviet Union. And so, yes, Stalin did the right thing, but there were some political reasons why, for the survival of the Soviet Union, their very survival depended on our aid, you know.
You know, Lori, the Lord works in mysterious ways.
There you go.
That's what they told me growing up.
Exactly.
And I believe it. And I will say I've been looking into Orthodox Christianity. I was reading today about the concept of theosis, which I find really fascinating. I just find the split between the Orthodox and Roman Catholics, you know, growing up Southern Baptist, it was like you achieve salvation and it's sort of like you're better morally, but you're cut off from the idea that you could fuse with God. And I don't know. I'm just open to learning and, you know, finding out new things and keeping an open mind. And, you know, when I try not to just shut down immediately when I hear something, because that's not a way to learn anything. Like when Pastor Miilhan, you know, mentioned Reverend Moon said something about he was the second coming. I mean, there's a part of my upbringing that's like, what's going on? But you know,
a bold statement, is it not? Yeah.
It's a, what did you say?
It's a bold statement.
It's a bold statement. I like bold statements. You know, let's hear the guy out. Maybe let's see what's going on. I want to, who knows, you know, but I will ask you, Pastor Miilhan, is this a strange bedfellow moment for you to be on this podcast with two communists that consider themselves Christians?
No, I mean, I took a look at some of your previous, you know, podcasts, and I mean, what's strange is, yes, politically, religiously, we're different, but I think we're all seeking the truth. I think we're very much on the same page about that. Like, I look at all the different types of news, and I'm like, okay, how is God working exactly? Because it's a little hard, you know. It's kind of everything else. When I see from God's point of view, it gets a lot clearer for me, actually, because if you only live in the politics, you know, socioeconomics, geopolitical, then it's just a sea of opinion. And I don't know how, Caleb, you can sort through all that. It's amazing. But for me, it's just like, okay, simply people looking for love, looking for the greatest love. And it's just not enough to go around. And so people are just going mad. And anyway, but forget your question. I'm half.
Oh no, it's your.
I had a question, if I may butt in a little bit. I'm on neither side. I'm kind of playing moderator here. I'm intellectually curious.
She's an unconscious communist. She doesn't know it yet. She calls herself a libertarian.
You know, it's funny. We say the same thing. We say that everybody's a libertarian. They just don't know it yet.
That's probably true.
Yeah.
I just say I'm both.
So they say that about me. They say she's a communist, but she doesn't know it yet. I guess you'd call me a fellow traveler because I like you guys. And if that makes me a fellow traveler, fine.
Hop on in.
We
Hop
agree
on in. You'll like where we're
lot.
going, Lori.
So my question is, and any of you can feel free to take this question. Given our current foreign policy towards North Korea, if we can't stop this crazy train, where's it going to lead us? What do you think? Where are we headed? Anyone?
Maybe I'll just be the first quick.
Go ahead, Pastor.
I mean, I just see, I mean, people, you see headlines, World War III, blah, 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 but I just don't see the resolution. I don't see any obvious direction in a positive way. The machines are still running us off the cliff to me. I kind of like Caleb put it once, like this giant boulder coming down and you can't stop it, but maybe you can nudge in the right direction. I kind of see that too. Hopefully if the few of us who can get the real truth out there can help people make informed decisions.
Amen. And that's where faith comes in for me. I mean, my biggest problem still with Marxism, Leninism, or whatever is that, you know, my friends will insult me and call me an idealist. That's the worst thing you can be called, it appears.
You may
in the
say
Marxist
I'm a dreamer.
community. but
But I'm not the
I
only one.
I don't know. It's just I still talk to God, and when things get tough, I just ask for his help to make the right decision, put my ego aside, try to live for something bigger than myself. And I don't have it all figured out, but maybe with his help, we can move forward in the right direction. And I found Caleb, and we linked up in CPI, and I feel that's kind of a new thing in the 21st century. We're not getting out of feudalism anymore. There's a place for Christianity in our politics.
Caleb, where do you think this thing is headed? With Antony Blinken running the State Department, with Joe Biden running the United States, with all of this anti-communist rhetoric, this new Cold War, this new Red Scare, all of the propaganda tells us once again to hate North Korea, to fear North Korea, that they're going to come get us, they're going to nuke us. Are we trying to provoke them into doing just that? Are we so crazy that we want to provoke North Korea into deploying a nuclear weapon against South Korea? Or heaven forbid, where do you think this is going?
Well, I'll actually tell you, I am optimistic about the Korean Peninsula right now. Not because of what's happening, because what's happening right now is very bad. I mean, things are escalating right now in a very bad way. Why I'm optimistic is that, just last week, Jyoti Brar, our good friend from the Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninist, she was in South Korea, and she was on a big stage in front of a big crowd of thousands of people giving a speech calling for peace for the North. If she had done that in South Korea 5 years ago, she would have been put in prison and kicked out of the country immediately. She'd have done that in South Korea, 40 years ago, she probably would never have been heard from again, But the fact that that happened indicates to me, and the fact that the People's Democracy Party is able to pretty much openly operate right now, indicates that within the South Korean government, there are people who approve of them saying what they are saying, right? And that's a really, really big deal. And
you protested them. I mean, you got right in her face, or as close as you could get last month there in New York.
But that's a really big deal. That's a really, really big deal that she, she was able to have this, this public event. And also, I mean, and again, Pastor Miilhan, he can speak on this. I think he was in South Korea as well. And from what I understand, they had a big gathering of his religious organization where Mrs. Moon was presented with roses from Kim Il-sung in a public space, a gift from Kim Il-sung.
Donald Trump too.
Is this happened?
Yeah. Kim Jong-un. I mean, all the Kims sent flowers and beautiful gifts to our founders all the time. But what's funny is like this time you have Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump sent flowers with the same,
Interesting.
That's big. And that
is
says
huge.
Me, again, the fact that, you have public communist rallies happening in South Korea calling for peace with the North, which would not have been allowed, and they could easily shut it down immediately under the national security law.
Yeah.
The fact that you have religious gatherings where gifts from the North Korean leader and gifts from a prominent former president of the United States are being presented in the same gathering. And you have China and Russia right there, both of whom want peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula and are doing business with both countries, mind you, right? Russia and China both do big business with both South and North Korea. I think there's potential for peace more than ever before. And I think that's why we're seeing this aggression right now, because there's a lot of money that is being made from keeping the peninsula divided.
The last thing the United States has wanted for the last 80 years is peace between North and South Korea.
The military industrial complex is
going to get in the way,
hands over foot, and that there's a lot of Pentagon contractors and military corporations who would lose so much money.
That's right.
When my interaction with Donald Trump, when I interacted with him when he was running for president, the time where he called me his favorite reporter by accident. It was kind of a funny moment, but I asked him about Russia. I raised my hand and he said, all right, one last reporter, who's my favorite? You. And he pointed to me and I asked him, I said, Donald Trump, is it hard to be, supportive of Russia with the media and an anti-Russian overdrive? Well, he answered my question, but then he actually changed the conversation to started talking about South Korea.
I remember that.
Yeah, and when he answered my
do.
question, he's like, you know, we spend all this money sending weapons to South Korea and all that. Half my TVs are made in South Korea. They don't need my money. What is this? Yeah, you know, the fact that he took the conversation.
That's so Trump.
He hadn't even won
It
the
is so
election yet,
Trump.
but he was already saying,
Trump.
why are we wasting American taxpayer money? You know, he's already been thinking about this. I think that Donald Trump, honestly, I think that he wants to be Richard Nixon. Like when he was a young man, Nixon was the president, and he like had a crush on Nixon. He thought, that's what I want to be. And so Nixon's big moment.
Who doesn't, you know?
Right.
Not me.
Nixon's big moment was he sat down with Mao, right? And I think Donald Trump, that's why he was determined to go to North Korea. He wanted to be the president who sat down with another communist leader from Asia. I think that's what's going on there.
Yes, I think so too.
And that a lot of people on his staff were against it, but he said, no, I want to go down in history as the American president who started the process of peace on the Korean Peninsula.
Trump.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was a
And,
very expensive photo op.
yeah.
You know,
And so I'm optimistic despite everything that's happening. I think the reason we're seeing an overdrive right now is that there's a desperation to try and undo what's going to happen anyway. North Korea doesn't want to have nuclear weapons. The only reason they have nuclear weapons is because they are convinced that if they got rid of them, they'd be overthrown. They'd be invaded. They say, look, Saddam Hussein didn't have weapons of mass destruction.
I'm right.
Look what
We
happened
don't-
there.
we'd invade them in a minute.
Muammar Gaddafi.
And Gaddafi got rid of his, and look what happened there. So
That's right.
we're holding on to ours for now. But if North
That's
Korea
such
could
a
get into
real
a
thing, yeah.
situation where they feel like Russia and China would have their back, they wouldn't get invaded, where things were de-escalating, maybe U.S. troops were leaving South Korea or being reduced in South Korea, I think North Korea would probably give up their nuclear weapons. And when that happens, all the UN sanctions on North Korea get lifted like that. And that will be a huge money-making opportunity because most North Koreans can speak more than one language. Did you know this? Most of them are bilingual. And they are highly educated. Those mountains in North Korea are full of coal. They are full of rare minerals that are used in computer chips. And when North Korea is open for business, there is going to be a financial boom on the Korean Peninsula. And the coast of North Korea is ready to have hotels open up on it. Tourists are going to go there.
Sign me up.
It is going to be a huge moment. And Kim Jong-un
Man,
has
drama's
said,
gonna go crazy everywhere.
yeah, Kim Jong-un has said he
Yeah.
wants to be the Deng Xiaoping of North Korea. He wants to be the guy who carries out the reform and opening up of North Korea. He wants to do that. And he tried to do it with Obama, and Obama wouldn't go along with it. So Donald Trump seemed interested in it, but then John Bolton sabotaged it and all of that. So I'm actually really hopeful. And I think Biden is trying to undo what's being accomplished. So that's
absolutely he is.
I apologize
Yes,
if
he
I'm
is.
long-winded. I just
No.
have a lot to say.
Well, that leads
You
to
know?
my next question. And I love what you're telling me. This actually sounds quite hopeful, and it's exactly the opposite of what the mainstream media is telling me, that it's hopeless, that there's no dealing with North Korea. You just can't talk to them. That's what they tell us. But it sounds like the truth, of course, is quite different from what the mainstream media tells us. So my next question is, our next president of the United States, I'm hoping it won't be Biden again, whether it's Trump.
Why
whether
not,
it's-
Lori?
Oh, God.
What do you got against Biden, Lori?
His foreign policy
He's
is the
doing
main
his
thing I
best.
have against him. Don't like his
Beating up on
domestic
an old
policies
man.
either. But specifically as regards the Korean situation, let's say that our next president is Donald Trump, or maybe even Robert F. Kennedy Jr. What ultimately do you think the next president can and should do to bring about this peaceful reunification?
Well, look, the reason that the USA gave for pulling out of the talks was they said that we won't talk until North Korea gives up their nukes. That's not how negotiations work, right?
Exactly.
You know, at that point you'd have nothing to talk about. They already gave it up, right? You start with a little carrot here and a little carrot here, and gradually you work your way up. And that's what they were doing. And that first meeting that happened between Kim and Trump, they agreed. They agreed with returning the bodies of dead soldiers. I forget. There was like 5 points. They were really basic points, but that's the beginning of it, right? That's the beginning of the process, right? And that get those talks going again. Tulsi Gabbard is a huge supporter of getting the talks going again. Jim Rogers, the legendary investor in Singapore, is a huge supporter of it. Dennis Rodman, the basketball player, he went to North Korea during the Obama administration.
Ambassador Rodman
cultivated kind of a friendship with Kim.
Yeah,
Kim Jong-un.
there are a lot of people, I think, who really want to get involved in there. I think a lot of the crypto community really likes North Korea.
Interesting.
The crypto bros, a lot of them really want to do business in North Korea, and that North Korea is very
Makes sense.
and from what I understand, North Korea is very supportive of cryptocurrencies.
Yeah,
I don't know
we'll do
exactly what
business
that's
anywhere.
about. What's that?
I said we'll do business anywhere. Make
I
the
guess
number
so.
go up.
So I'm hoping that things can go in a positive direction. I really hope that Kamala Harris doesn't become president. And I think the only way Kamala Harris can become president is that Biden gets reelected and then has a heart attack or something like that. Kamala Harris, she attacked Donald Trump for going to North Korea, and she said it was a photo op, and that and she attacked him for it. And that I've written a whole book about Kamala Harris and how dangerous she is. I mean, if you look into who she is, her background, her psychology, her communist father, who she's estranged from, who she's cut all ties with, who denounced her during the campaign for how she spoke about her Jamaican family. And there's a lot there that no one talks about. When Barack
that
Obama
woman
was
scares the daylights out of me.
Everything. He went to a Muslim school. This was his pastor, everything. No one knows anything about Kamala Harris except that she gives really good speeches or whatever. But there's a lot there.
She does?
There's a lot there. And she is very dangerous. She would nuke North Korea.
North Korea's up here and South Korea's down here, and they don't get along right here.
What time does that woman start drinking in the morning?
I don't know.
I swear she's sloshed by 10 a.m.
Yeah, and they know how to push her buttons, and she would attack North Korea if they told her to. And that's what scares me, right? Is that she's kind of a fragile person if you look at it. And what she did as a prosecutor in California shows that she has absolutely no remorse. I mean, there were thousands of people she locked up for smoking marijuana, and then they asked her, "Hey, did you ever smoke marijuana?" And she's like, "Oh, half my family's from Jamaica. I love weed." Oh, and it's like, wait, you locked up thousands of people for it. There was an innocent man who was on death row. He was going to get the death penalty. And the governor of California said, "I want to make sure the guy's guilty. I want DNA evidence." And Kamala Harris said no. And she tried to block it. She tried to block DNA evidence in this case. She was overruled. The DNA evidence came in and the guy didn't get the death penalty. Now, I mean, to me, I'm not a legal scholar or anything. That looks like attempted murder to me. I mean, if there's somebody who's on death row who DNA evidence could acquit them and you try to prevent it, that's not ethical behavior. I mean, that is some dangerous stuff. But she has no qualms about it. She just, hey, I mean, she has no problem. And she sees herself as a victim. That's a really big part of it. She has pictures of her 10-year-old self everywhere. That little girl was me. Right. She obviously had some very horrendous experiences in her childhood, which, that's horrendous. And we feel very sad for her about that. Right. But that doesn't give her the right to then violate the rights of other people. And this is kind of when I talk about the problems in the history of our movement and communism. When you think of yourself as a victim, that gives you a license to harm other people. And that's what people don't realize.
Say, hurt people, hurt other people.
Hurt people. And the history of communism, you look at the French Revolution, all those guillotines and head chopping, all that ugly stuff. Well, all those peasants had been victimized. And that's what enabled them to think, oh, we can commit these horrendous crimes because we're victims. And the Cultural Revolution in China, which now they say was just an absolute disaster, that was largely people who had been victimized in the old society, people who'd been from peasant backgrounds and all that, ganging up on people from more privileged backgrounds, beating them up, this is not a good way of doing things, right? There's a reason that Jesus in the Bible was always talking about, reconciliation and forgiveness and turn the other cheek. And I mean, there's a reason for that, because you can't hold society together on the basis of everyone just lashing out at everyone else and seeing themselves as a victim. And you have to learn to love your neighbor as yourself. You have to learn to live for the sake of others. That's the basis of just being a human being and not being an animal. And I think that there's a need for that.
But we're talking about politicians here, Caleb.
Yeah.
They're psychopaths. They're sociopaths. They don't have, a lot of them just don't have any human
I think that's
empathy.
True.
And I just want to say, to tie into my question, which you still haven't quite answered yet, so I'm going to try and get you back to the question. Our next president, let's say for a moment that it's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. It's a long shot, but let's just say that Kennedy makes it to the White House. He's the only candidate in this race who has pledged unequivocally to close all U.S. military bases all around the world and bring our troops home. which would mean we would finally get the hell out of Korea. And would that alone solve the problem as far as you're concerned? And what else would the new president need to do to bring about this peaceful reunification and get the United States out of their business?
Well, I'll just say this. Pledging to get rid of all the bases in the world is a great thing, and I support that 100%. But it's not something you can do overnight. These bases are pretty big, and there's a lot of people and all of that. But the reduction of a U.S. military presence in South Korea, I think, would be really quickly getting the ball rolling toward peaceful reunification.
I do too.
I think at that point, if the troop reduction in South Korea were to take place, then North Korea giving up its nuclear weapons would be much quicker. So
I have a question. I'm trying to think of how to phrase it. First of all, I think we should all pray for Kamala Harris. I think we can all agree on that. We should all pray for Kamala Harris. I also kind of want to do satirical Kamala Harris campaign ads, but we'll cross that bridge later. There's a lot. It sounds like a rich mine.
We'd have a lot of fun with those.
I have to say a lot of prayers before and after I do that.
You
anyway,
think you just fell out of a coconut tree?
And
I saw
every
someone's
branch on the
comment
way
that
down.
she gave a speech on space and said it was very big. I thought that was a funny comment. But I don't want to start an argument, but where I'm from,
you do.
Well, it's rural Missouri. People hear about North Korea. They're going to say you can't be a Christian in North Korea. Now, Caleb, I've heard you talk about, I can't remember if it was Jehovah Witness or Seventh-day Adventist, or there were some kind of missionaries you were talking about that have quite a presence in North Korea. And Pastor Miilhan, you can absolutely comment on this. Like I said, I don't want to cause any division or, argument. We're having a kumbaya moment, but I just know people around here would be curious about that, and I wanted to get your takes on it.
Well, as I understand it, we have churches in North Korea.
Okay.
And of course, Pyeonghwa Motors, we gave to them.
Now, what was that? Tell us about that. That was a motor company? That was a car company?
Yeah, automobile manufacturing company. A lot of infrastructure. Reverend Moon has always advocated for more give and take, more trade. That's how you make peace. You don't want to hurt your trade partner. I mean, that makes sense. That's why, what's happening in Russia too scares me. Yeah. Why would you do that? It's like, okay, you want to cause pain, but you're not thinking about tomorrow. You're not thinking about the seeds for tomorrow. If you're going to chop a tree down, you got to plant one too. So, the churches, I don't know if there's any other churches in North Korea than ours. I'd be kind of surprised if that were allowed at all. But our founders get along because it goes beyond religion. They know when Reverend Moon embraced Kim Il-sung, they were brothers. He called them Hyung, which is affectionate for like older brother. Reverend Moon was like a couple of years younger than Kim Il-sung, even though he was in a prison camp and almost died, and but he had to really, like go to God first. Okay, how do you see this, brother? And God loves Kim Il-sung, just like any of us. And so when Father Moon found that, despite all his struggle, and he didn't just agree with Kim Il-sung. He went up there and went right in his face, said, Juche ideology is nuts. It doesn't work. Godism is the way. But they love the boldness. Like that's the Korean spirit. And Father Moon loves how, North Korea, they're preserving that Korean culture and all these things. And South, it's kind of getting lost a bit. So I feel like there's, if we look at it from God's point of view, there's good things to learn from each other. Yeah, I think that's how we should. America should look at China and say, "What are you doing right?"
Right.
Exactly. As opposed to demonizing. Like what good does that do exactly?
Oh, they're successful. We have to demonize them. They're bad.
Yeah,
that seems to be how we look at things here now.
Well, I think between North and South, it's love of money is the root of all evil. And, just me, when I look in, it's kind of, there's some interesting things going on the money side of the equation. Like plastic surgery amongst girls is very prevalent from what I understand. I mean, there's a ton of class films on that side of the line. But I'd hold out faith. I think, God may be working through atheistic, Marxist Leninist parties, that are helping bring the kingdom of heaven to earth. I think I can see that working. Is it a straight line? Absolutely not. But when I was a 6-year-old and they told me how evil communism was, and then I was like, well, what is it? Oh, it's taking care of everybody. It's loving your neighbors. I'm like, well, that sounds a lot
wait,
like
that's
what you
bad?
drag me to every single week. I don't.
Right.
It's kind of interesting. So I don't know. I no matter how dark it looks, it's always the darkest before dawn, and interesting things are happening out there. So
Well, what I like about this, and why I'm so glad you're doing this peace march and we're having this conversation tonight, is this is a political show and we're all realists here. We understand that solutions ultimately are going to be political, but there has to be a spiritual aspect, because to my mind anyway, and probably to yours as well, the real solution is in our hearts. It's between human beings. It's like you say, God working through us to bring opposites together and find love for our fellow man,
Amen,
even if
Pastor
we
Lori.
disagree with their politics. Right?
The
Amen.
forgiveness, the love, the reconciliation, that like greases the gears for the politics, you see.
Yes, exactly.
It allows it to run smoothly because God, the Holy Spirit can get involved. It's like, but no, we need politics. Never misunderstand that. We need a Reverend always worked with politics. Of course, I can't speak about it because my members are all over the place too.
Well, believe me, I wish diplomacy was happening between. I wish religious leaders were our diplomats instead of politicians. I think we would probably have a lot more peace in the world. The peace movement historically has always been led by religious figures, church groups, and
not
people like you.
But it's the first step.
It's the first step, and a
It's
critical step.
Yeah.
And it always has to be a component of any, I think, lasting peace,
Absolutely. Well, I got one last question. I'm pretty sure I'll forget if I don't ask this, and I don't know how much you'll know about it, Pastor Miilhan, but I figured I'd throw it out there. When I was young, I loved the Three Ninjas movies. I wanted to be a ninja. You remember those?
I grew up with
and I'd watch. I don't know if you ever got that, but you watch a martial arts film.
Yeah.
Have you ever watched one in the theater and then you're just like, you just leave like I loved it. So I just yelled in the mic, Lori, I'm sorry. But when I was 9, I begged my mom. I begged her. I go, please let me take karate lessons. Please, 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 please. She's like, no, you'll hurt yourself. You can't do it, blah, blah, blah. So I didn't get in karate, but I got in the American Taekwondo Association. And we had the South Korean flag on the wall. And those were some of the happiest years of my life. I was in there for about 5 or 6 years. Not to brag, I did get to the black belt. I'll say, but I learned so much. I was in the best shape of my life. I was young, but I learned so much respect, and I think probably unconsciously, I learned a lot about Korean culture in a very positive way that I don't know. It helped me make me who I am today, and those are just very positive, formative years in my life. I really enjoyed it. I mean, I got in there so I could be like the movies, but the sense of respect is mainly what I remember, and I'm grateful for. Do you know anything about that organization at all?
You mean Taekwondo?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I did Taekwondo when I was a kid.
Okay.
Also, I didn't get to black. I got to look. I was a really sensitive kid, boy. But I was very flexible. My teacher, he put his hand here, and I'd behind my neck.
The way of the foot.
Yeah. I don't know that much. I didn't research it at all, but I remember I was learning Korean language. Some words are, that you count in Korean and certain words are Korean. And so this, just the Korean language, you got to understand the Korean language is very deep.
Mm-hmm.
King Sejong, he created a language for his people. He made a language for his own people. And all the characters are shaped in different, like in the shape of a mouth. So it's you look at the history of linguistics or the languages, and you'll find there's always a history, and it's not always a pretty one. But the Korean language is very pure. It comes from the love of the people, and so for me, Taekwondo was like, I was like I grew up in a white community, in Illinois, Bloomington, Illinois. So I did Taekwondo there, and I remember the master, Manny, his name was, and he was Korean, and I also had a taste of the Korean language and the culture, very pure. Korea never invaded other nations. They had civil conflicts, but I feel like God has positioned Korea to be a peacemaker. And it's heartbroken that they're divided, because I think they can't really fulfill their potential to bring peace to the world.
I have a kind of a personal story to share. I'm probably the oldest person on this panel. I'm in my 50s. I grew up as a child in the 1970s. And here in Oklahoma City, during and after the Korean War and the Vietnam War, we took in many, many thousands of refugees. And I grew up in a neighborhood where my neighbors were largely Korean and Vietnamese families who had fled the wars and came over here for a better life. And, their parents were first generation who spoke the language, barely spoke any English. And I spent a lot of time, like a lot of kids like me probably didn't bother to, or didn't have that experience because they didn't have neighbors and classmates who were from these war-torn countries. And I grew up with them. They were my best friends. We were always over at each other's houses. So we had this cultural exchange, and we would have food together, and I'd go over and eat with them, and they'd show me how to cook Korean food. And we'd show them how to cook Southern fried chicken. And we had this beautiful friendship, and a lot of them are still friends for life to this day. We still see each other. We keep in touch, and they've gone on to have wonderful, successful lives here in the United States. And these kids my age, they were born here. Their parents came here as refugees. They were born in the United States and were as Americanized as you can get. So we know it's possible, you see. That's what I'm trying to say. Our generation, even though we were Cold War kids, we were colorblind. We were blind to the politics. We didn't see those divisions. You don't see that when you're a kid. All you know is that's your friend Susie from Korea, and she's cool.
Right.
She's fun. You like her. She likes you. And kids, we don't need diplomacy. Politics gets in the way. Kids are just going to be friends, or they're going to be enemies. They either like you or they don't.
Well, Jesus was onto something when he said, "You got to come to me as a child." I know.
Yes. Exactly.
I was going to try out. I only knew 2 Korean words. They taught us the word for nunchucks, which was songjobong. I don't know if that's correct or not. And the other one was balmungi, which was like I don't know. I'm embarrassing myself, but I just figured we'd some comic relief for you, Pastor.
Those 2 words I never.
Those aren't real words, probably.
Those aren't really words.
They just probably told us that in Salem, Missouri. This is some Korean kids. We're going to teach you.
Those weren't the
Teach them
first
some
words
nonsense.
We're like, yeah, we know Korean.
I didn't get to the nunchucks.
Okay. Yeah, that's probably not one of the first words you learn, probably. So anyway.
Too funny.
But I was curious if you what would you want the average American in rural Missouri, that's where I live, what would you want them to know about Korea?
Korea. What do you know about Korea?
If that's too broad of a question, we don't have to go into it. But I don't know. What do they need to
most
know? Where should they
Americans
start?
don't know
Okay.
and they don't care. That's the sad part. Is your average American is out tonight on a Friday night in May, enjoying their evening. They don't give a damn about the whole Korean situation. They're not watching this show. They're not paying attention. But we do have some people who do care, and they are watching, and they don't hate Koreans. They want peace too. So I know we're kind of preaching to the choir, but the average American just doesn't know anything about North Korea or even South Korea because they've never bothered to travel there.
Okay, here it is. Kind of thinking of you three. I'm talking to you three right now, to be honest.
Okay.
It's the opportunity. Caleb talked about the economic opportunity, but that's a deep political opportunity too, because you have a very homogenous group of people who love family. Really, you watch any Korean drama, it's all about the family.
That's right.
This opportunity for this country to unite, and when that happens, all the and sure Caleb be all over the innovation right there, and they might seek your counsel. Like, okay, well, what does this look like? And you know what? That precedent will guide the entire world. And that Reverend Moon's that's his mantra his entire life was just, he knew the Korean Peninsula would not be united unless the world came together. So it's kind of, it's right there, next to Russia, Japan, it is right in the middle, and it didn't bother anybody. The world decided to, take whatever they could from this little country. The reason why they're a hermit kingdom is because they got it going on already. They don't need I understand
like that.
They got a beautiful culture. Even their dress, they have the women wear their hanboks. It comes up to here as opposed to here, and, it's very, very, God loves this country, and God wants that culture to spread, not the other way around. I don't think God wants Western stuff in there,
Yeah.
God wants to see Korea lead, show the world how it's done, to lead. So, but you bring Christ in Korea, it's an amazing thing happens. So it's something to look at, an opportunity is what I say.
That's a brilliant answer, a beautiful answer. I love that. And I think it's really important around here when they get sidelined on the politics sometimes and they forget about the Christianity, and I think it's very helpful to be like, God loves Korea. God loves North Korea. And it reminds me of your old friend, Bill Hicks, Lori.
Yeah.
When he said Christians would get mad at him at his stand-up shows. And yeah, buddy, I didn't like what you said up there. He goes, I'm a Christian. He goes, well, then forgive me.
Forgive me.
And they just look at him all confused.
You stumped me there, buddy. I don't know how to do that.
But that's an important thing to remind Americans, especially, the Christian nation that is America, that God loves Korea, just like he loves your country.
We're all God's children.
Amen.
Kumbaya, my Lord.
I knew Jeff was queuing that up. I knew that was coming, Jeff.
You're not the only guy.
You know what, Jeff? I'm putting this on for you because you're up there somewhere. I know you are, Jeff. There you are.
Yes,
There's
there we
Jeff. He always plays those sounds.
He's returned.
I got to find a way to do that quicker. Oh, well.
Oh, love it. Now, you're pretty quick on the draw. I see we have some Bill Hicks fans in the house. All right. That's awesome. I was going to say, I watched the new Jimmy Dore comedy special last night. It's called COVID Lies Are Funny. Absolutely great show. Everybody needs to watch it, no matter what your politics are. We've all been through so much in the last 3 years, and our governments did some really stupid things to try and fight COVID. And I can't talk about it on YouTube. I'll just say, go to jimmydorcomedy.com, jimmydorcomedy.com, and watch that comedy special. We all need a laugh. We need to lighten up after the last 3 years, and we need to be able to laugh at all the dumb shit we did so that we can start to heal those broken relationships.
Mhm.
They used COVID to divide us. It was a cultural dividing line in our country. It was a political dividing line, and across the whole world. And, before we just forget about it and move on, which is what a lot of people would just rather do. They're over it. They don't want to think about it anymore. Have a good laugh, let it out, and
Does anybody remember laughter?
and then call your damn neighbor. The neighbor that you disagreed with, remember the one during COVID, the one who either wore a mask or didn't wear a mask, and you were mad at them because they wouldn't comply or they wouldn't be good.
Yeah.
It's time to call them now. It's time to call your family members that you were estranged from and fighting over this stupid COVID argument that divided us so much. It divided families, it divided communities, it divided churches. It's time for us to heal that divide. So please watch that show.
Can I say one more
Please.
comment about that?
Please.
Call somebody. Yes, please do.
It's about knowing who your neighbor is.
Yeah.
And people forget that Russia is our closest neighbor.
Right.
You turn the map a little bit, you see two brothers trying to reach each other. But there's every obstacle of getting there, and we have to see it that way. It's like, no, it's America and Russia trying to reach these two brothers. Like, how can we get along? How can we? But the world's dividing us. We're all divided because of all these other forces, right? But how can we? Some of us want to reach, and like that is your neighbor. Please go back and call them up. We have technology now.
Yeah.
War and all these misunderstandings, so obsolete. We have technology. We can send an email, call.
Yes.
That's a helpful reminder to me because it happened to me. I think it happened to everybody. There was a moment where, my personal one was people were having a get together and we were in this group chat and someone was like, well, I'm vaccinated and my kids are too, so we're safe. And it was just a weird, you know what I mean? But these are people I love and I've loved for years.
Did they not want you to come to the family
that
gathering?
Was kind of what it was. It was,
Yeah.
it was like, well, we're safe. I don't know about the other people. And it was one of those moments. And it really,
There were people who were told you're not family anymore. You can't come for
got
Christmas.
dirty.
If
It got
you didn't
dirty
take
and the same, I think the same people that did the war in Korea are the same people that have divided people over that one. And, division it's not the way, and I thought of one last thing I wanted to say about, we talked about Bill Hicks a little bit, but I always say my two biggest influences in life are Jesus Christ and Bill Hicks.
That's perfect.
And then you brought up Jimmy Dore, and I don't think Jimmy Dore would have been a comedian if it weren't for Bill Hicks.
No.
And Bill Hicks' comedy wouldn't have been any good if it weren't for Jesus Christ.
Oh, Tyler, you'll love it. He actually throws in quite a few Bill Hicks references.
Oh, I love that.
Stand-up comedy special. You'll love that as a Bill Hicks fan.
I just wanted to say that, before we wrap up here, that you don't know what. I mean, that's where faith comes in for me. You don't know what we say here tonight that might click with somebody or down the line lead to somebody important changing their mind, or you don't know. I mean, I've seen videos from this channel translated into Russian. This might be translated into Korean. I don't know.
I hope so.
It's possible. It's
so.
obvious. It's obviously possible. It's already happened. We're on episode 4, and I've seen myself speak Russian. I never thought that would happen in a million years, but
me neither.
You don't know. You just got to have faith, and you got to keep putting one foot in front of the other, and good things can happen as long as you don't give in to fear and hate.
That's right.
I would love to be able to get along with Russia.
So he said.
Nani believes it.
So he said. Then he turned around and gave a bunch of money and weapons to Ukraine, and then a war started. So I don't know, Mr. Trump. Anyway, peace is the order of the day. It will be tomorrow at the New York Peace March. And for more information, please go to nypeacemarch.com. And you can learn more about what's happening tomorrow in New York City. The CPI gathering is going to be at Union Square at high noon. And then they're going to join forces and march everyone up to the United Nations meeting there around 2 p.m. in Dag Hammarskjöld Square. So I hope that you'll have a great turnout tomorrow. I hope that God sends you beautiful weather and everything works out just the way you want it to. And thank you so much for coming on our show, for educating us, for bringing love and peace into this broadcast tonight. There are a lot of people in America who are just mad. They're just mad all the time about everything, and they're mad at everyone. And, they're just mad. They forgot why. They're just angry. And this show, even though I know we don't have a huge audience like Scott does, I think we're doing something good here. And if you enjoyed this broadcast, if you learned something from it, I hope you'll share it with a friend. And especially if you have any friends who are Korean.
Absolutely. And I wanted to thank you for coming on, Pastor Stephens. It was an absolute pleasure. I think a lot of you. I can tell you're a good guy, and I hope we do this many more times. And I wish you great success this weekend.
Thank you so much. It means a lot for for your kindness to me too. Thank you.
And thank you, Caleb, for coming on and helping us out, brother. Always.
Sure. Anytime.
Caleb, you are
Comrade
wonderful.
Caleb.
You're the facilitator of this conversation. You're the one who put us in touch with Pastor Stephens. So
The walking
Glad
encyclopedia, Caleb Maupin.
as always, you are so helpful, and thank you guys. And before we go, I just want to put a plug in for our man, the man of the hour, Scott Ritter, who's on his way back from Russia, and we'll be back next Thursday night, June the 1st, for the next edition of Ask the Inspector, hopefully right from his comfy bedroom in the United States. I'm sure he's ready to come home, hug the wife, kiss the dog.
Back in the USSA.
And get back in the USSA. And join us
right,
next Friday night here on Strange Bedfellows when our guest will be Lisa Pease. She's the author of a book about the Robert F. Kennedy assassination called A Lie Too Big to Fail. And this is a really challenging book. She argues that Sirhan Sirhan did not kill Senator Robert Kennedy in 1968. As you recall, he was assassinated on the campaign trail in California after winning the California primary. And it's fortuitous that we will have Lisa on the show on June, I guess, the 2nd, because that is coming up on the 55th anniversary of Robert Kennedy's assassination. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the fact that possibly an innocent man has been sitting in prison for 55 years. And despite efforts from even some of his victims, like Paul Schrade, and members of the Kennedy family, including presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr., have lobbied for his release from prison because they truly believe that he did not kill Senator Robert Kennedy. So
well, that never happens, does it, Lori? Innocent people never go to jail, do they?
Yeah, well, you'll be surprised who they think really done it.
Hashtag Julian Assange. I will just pray for YouTube's favor next week with that content, and I think we'll do quite well. But thanks to both of our guests again for an absolute brilliant conversation. And once again, wish you guys luck this weekend.
Peace.